podcast. I'm your host, Collington. With me, as always, Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing okay. It's been a bit of an interesting week in Flyer land here. We had a couple losses to talk about. The week ended on a pretty big high note, a little revenge in the air. We'll get into all that
sure.
as we dive in here. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where he's just at Kevin Durso. Okay, so diving right in. Let's start with the boring stuff. Let's start with the beginning part of the week. Let's start with the games against Toronto.
Well, not boring in the beginning. Two very entertaining games that kind of just level out. Toronto is Toronto. They're a top 6 team in the league. They win two games.
And I think both these games end up going down as good kind of tank losses, right? Where you pushed a good team, you ended up losing. If like I said, if you're on team Flyers get the first pick, you're a big fan of those two games in Toronto because they looked good. You saw some stuff, but they end up not getting any points.
Well, and let's go back because of the fact that we did a show on the day of the first game in Toronto, knew who the goalie was going to be that night, and probably expected a 5-2 loss or something. Like, you're getting a goalie who hasn't played in a month. This is going to be fun. And he gave you a shot to win a game.
Well, and you did see some of that rust early. Like, the 2 goals in the first period.
Not the first one. The first one was Ryan Poehling makes a dumb decision. And then you give up a rebound, and his rebound control isn't sharp because it's too early in the game. And you give a goal right back to them. And
40 seconds after you opened it.
Well, and do you even need, like, I don't even need to say any more about it. Like, I can classify it as a dumb decision because, geez, I mean, do we need to see the clip again? You know, they cut right to the bench. John Tortorella basically ran to the door of the bench and was giving it to Poehling the second he sat down.
Absolutely right. And I'm sure Poehling knew it.
He knew. Sure he knew. Like, they know when they make a mistake that, well, they know when they make a mistake in general. When it ends up in the net, they really know.
Yeah. And when when your coach is John Tortorella, you really know.
But I think what happened there more than anything is that mistakes will happen and it leads to a chance and it may even lead to a goal. I think it's because it was basically the next shift after they score a goal. It's like, why did you do that? You know better. And honestly, before they even started the game, because I didn't get a chance to, we were recording basically right as the goalie announcement came out. When I went back and watched the pregame availability that day where that was announced, basically Tortorella flat out said from the very beginning, it's going to be about play in front of the goalie. And then right away, you make a critical mistake that puts your goalie in a bad spot because now he has to try to bail out your mistake.
And then
only with the Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Matthew Nyes line out there that had just put up the day before. Marner and Nyes both had 5 points in the game against Boston. They played the night before. So maybe don't turn the puck over to that line and give them a chance.
Austin Matthews is maybe the best goal scorer in the league right now. Like,
yeah.
I said maybe.
Well, no. There's somebody with like legendary goal scoring status that might want a word this year.
There's a difference between best right now and greatest of all time.
No, but I'm saying I think the two have overlapped a little bit this year.
I mean, Ovi's
turned the clock back.
Listen, we didn't really mention it on our last show that he's or in the last couple shows that he has come back and been an absolute maniac, but Alexander Ovechkin's already up to 20 goals on the season and is just rapidly chasing down Wayne Gretzky. It's
22 away.
22 away. And when he came back from injury, he was like, what, 34 away? 2 weeks ago?
No, it wasn't that many. He was already at 15.
Okay.
He hasn't been back that long, to your point.
He has scored a lot of goals since he has come back.
He's still scored something like 5 and 8 or something. I'm just guessing. I'm not like trying to look at the Ovechkin.
Scored another one yesterday at time of recording, but
no, he did, and it was empty netter, but empty netter again. But like, yeah, they all count, don't they?
They don't ask how. Finish it for me.
Yeah, I know. They ask how many,
baby. Come on. And
Anyway,
when he passes Wayne Gretzky against the Flyers, probably, it's gonna be crazy.
if
Anyway,
it,
back to Toronto
yeah,
here.
back to Toronto.
So
No,
the
but you
second goal, the one towards the end of the first period.
that's probably the one that more falls like the Fedotov could play a little bit better. You don't want to be in a situation where you're lunging, you're trying to reach for something, you get a little caught up there. I mean, as much as that's a Fedotov thing, I don't love that. Like, it felt like
Lunged
everybody
in front
around.
of him.
Well, I know. I felt like everybody around him kind of just stopped and was waiting for him to just cover the puck. And when he doesn't do it, it's like you're also not trying to tie up the stick that is coming in to
It's
do
like,
something with it.
guys, we need you in here helping out.
So it was collective a little bit to me. I mean, I'm not taking Fedotov off the hook at all. I just thought that was like a little bit of everybody. But and same thing, like that even the Toronto game on home ice that you play, you don't get any points for it. But that was, again, you carried a 2-2 game into the last 10 minutes of the third period, the last 7 minutes of the third period. Honestly, like, you played them tough.
And I wanted to mention, by the way, that second goal in the first period of the Sunday game was the last goal that Fedotov allowed in regulation. And after that, he settled down and looked really solid for the rest of the game.
Right.
And then they rewarded him by giving him the start on Tuesday, and he rewarded them by looking solid again.
Well, and the thing was, he did, but like, so the interesting part with that game is that, or with that one in particular, was so you play that game out, and he doesn't give up a goal in the first period. Toronto ends up scoring twice in the second period, and basically it came back that it wasn't this, but basically 2 power play goals. The Matthews one was it was a second after a power play ended. It might as well have been. Yeah. I don't like the Tavares goal at all because
I don't like his positioning on it. I don't.
Right, because it looks like he just gives up half the net, and you're asking a player like John Tavares, who I believe this was the case for both teams. I'm not completely certain about Toronto. I know it was for the Flyers. Tuesday was the halfway point of the season. Game 41. I think Toronto
was their 42nd or 43rd game, but either way,
it might have been. I don't remember. Like, regardless, I think it was Toronto's 41st because I think when the night was like, when it was all said and done, Konechny scored both goals for the Flyers, got to 20, which could not be more perfect for what you're looking at because it sets you up for 40 goal pace.
He's on pace for 40. Yep.
So is John Tavares, though.
Wow, that's crazy.
And my point with that, and as much as he hasn't scored 40 a lot in his career, that was brought up. Tavares has not been like that typically. It doesn't matter.
47. Like he's got
what's
it.
What's that?
He topped out at 47. Like he's
right, but I think they said that was like the one. I think it was the only year he's done it.
I think that was his spike.
That's and that's what I'm saying. That's the point for a guy who's been in the league as long as John Tavares has. He's broken 40 once.
Yeah, and nobody in the history of John Tavares' career has criticized him for lack of offensive production.
No, not at all. But I'm saying he hasn't been as noted of a goal scorer sometimes. Like, he'll have a year where, like a good example is probably like his it wasn't his first year. His first year with the Leafs is when he had the 47, by the way. But his second season, he missed time. It wouldn't have been 40 goal pace missed time. But he was easily a 30 goal. So he probably really hovers around that 33-ish goal mark and then throws up at least 40 assists with it. And then ends
John
up
Tavares
with
is your standard 35, 50, 85 guy.
I was about to say he usually ends up with about 75 to 85 points.
Yep.
Pretty regularly.
And has been an elite producer his whole career.
Like, perfect example. His last 2 seasons, he's missed 4 total games last 2 seasons.
Oh, during the regular season.
Right. 80 and 80 he played. The 1 season, 2 seasons ago, 80 games, 36 goals, 44 assists, 80 points. Last season, 80 games, 29 goals, 36 assists, 65 points. There's your window. 29 to 36, 65 to 80.
And that is in a veteran, slightly reduced minutes, doesn't
right. You're not Austin Matthews, you're not Mitch Marner, you're not William Nylander. You're
and that's incredible production. Like, honestly,
sure.
At this point in time, if Tavares is still there somewhere, I know there's been some talk about him playing the wing, but Matthews Tavares 1-2 is still possibly the best combo in the league.
I hear you.
It's right up there, especially from an offensive production standpoint.
Um,
But either way,
but
like that unit took care of
right.
you on Tuesday night.
But I don't want to make this a John Tavares show.
No.
The point being, you don't give a guy who can shoot like that or has the potential to do stuff like that half the net and say pick your spot.
Give him the whole top right corner. Right.
And then ask him to do it and watch him do it.
Yep. Turns out in the NHL, guys will do it.
Well, he especially of that skill level. Exactly.
Yep.
So he picks his spot. Flyers get the lead back. Nice. By the way, Konechny gets the finish there. That's a brilliant play by Noah Cates. That 4-on-4. Just absolutely brilliant. He has continued to play on a different level. He ends up with, and we'll get to the end of the week later. He ends up with nothing against Anaheim. No points. Played a brilliant game to me. I thought him and Bobby Brink were two guys that were just up on it all night. And they don't score. They don't get points. They had nothing to do with the offense at all. But they were up the whole night and played and continued to play really well. You've got something with that group right now. And
well, and you mentioned Travis Konechny there. That was his second goal of the night. That second one in the second period there brought him to 20 on the season. It is worth noting, by the way, Austin Matthews did some media ahead of that game and called Travis Konechny the most underrated player in the NHL. So to see Travis Konechny see
deliver
that
on that a little,
of course he saw that, and then he comes out and scores 2 goals.
Do you know what? Do you want to know something that made me kind of smile about seeing that comment? Because I said basically the same thing about a month ago. Because when Four Nations
wasn't Alexander Barkov for once.
Well, no. That about a month ago when all the Four Nations stuff was being selected, I even said people are going to look at the names like Konechny, Sanheim making a team and not necessarily think that they
and
fit.
Scoff at it a little. Yep.
From a fan perspective, maybe even media-wise, you'll see it. And I'm telling you, the all-star appearances, you go around, whether you're the most, prolific all-star that's out there, like an Ovechkin type or a Crosby or somebody who's there all the time. I'm telling you right now, guys like Crosby, McKinnon, Matthews obviously just said it. They probably look at a guy like Travis Konechny and go, no, dude, you belong here. We think you do. We play against you. That should be all that matters. We're all part of the league. We're the NHL Players Association, right? We're all players in this league, and we think you're good enough to be here too. We would want you on a Four Nations team or on an all-star team.
And this will be a great chance for Travis Konechny to shine, because I have a feeling, okay, so Hockey Canada is in a little bit of crisis right now. World Juniors was a disaster 2 years in a row. We're nervous about the Olympic team. We couldn't get Joey Decord his visa. Like, things are a disaster for Hockey Canada kind of as a whole right now, and that doesn't even have anything to do with the courts. So they need some international success between Four Nations and the Olympics. And Travis Konechny,
right, and well, honestly, you're bridge the gap with World Juniors next year. Like, they need to do World Juniors better.
But I'm saying, if you can't get it, if you can't fix the major junior portion of your program, at least the NHL stars can carry some weight here.
Right, and let's be clear about something. Canada is still the leader of producing NHL players. That's never going to change, more than likely. But you can make the argument, because there is no surpassing Canada for the amount for the volume of hockey. Good.
The U.S. might get there based on numbers just because of the population. Just because Canada
that's where people were countering that argument, is that that doesn't make the U.S. the number one hockey producer of the world just because of the by percentage of players that are in the NHL to population. It's going to be greater in Canada.
How about winning gold at World Juniors? Does that make
well,
sense?
No, I get that, but that's what but that's what I'm saying. I think that's what people are more afraid of, is that has the U.S. potentially surpassed Canada in terms of what they're producing, especially when Canada just totally messes up the way that they constructed that team.
But here's what I have to say about Four Nations and about Travis Konechny.
Mm-hmm.
Canada, Hockey Canada, hockey fans in Canada who will be rooting for the Maple Leaf during that 2-week tournament. Travis Konechny is your new Brad Marchand.
And he's on that team too anyway.
And I know he is. No, I know.
And so you got two of them.
There, and And this, I think, in a lot of ways, the next two the next two international tournaments, being World Juniors and the Olympics, are going to be a passing of the torch, and it's time for Travis Konechny to take a step on the international stage as that Brad Marchand role. And I think, because I think Brad Marchand's a little on the older side and is on his
Sure.
way out, right? He's going to be more of a veteran leader
At some
rather
point.
than rather than a major producer on this Team Canada team.
Oh,
And
for sure. Like,
I think
for
you're going to
sure
see
you
a
can see
passing of the
the.
torch.
Yeah, well, and see, I don't even need to see it. I don't even need to say that from the international level. You can see where the wheels are eventually going to fall off on the Boston wagon here.
Oh,
Like,
man, you say that, man, but I'm not going to believe it
no,
until
they've
it
got
happens. I
they've
know.
they've got no depth and they've got no prospects that are really taking over. That's the thing. It's
No.
like you survived with a good season of Coyle, Zaka at center, the departure of Bergeron, Krejci, and now you've got like Pasternak's great, McAvoy's great, probably two of the best at their positions in the league. No
I
joke.
agree.
Obviously,
Yeah.
Marchand still has it, but you know he's on the back nine of his career at this point. Yes,
All
of
respect.
course.
Absolutely.
And you do have a very quality goaltender. I will give you that also. But you're lacking like what do we say about the Flyers and trying to build something? It can't just be, hey, you've got Michkov and Konechny and that's the forwards. Hey, you've got Sanheim. Maybe and Sanheim. I don't even know if people would qualify it. Like nobody's putting McAvoy and Sanheim in the same category. Sanheim's been good, but not the consistency level that McAvoy gives you from that kind of type of thing. And they certainly don't have a goalie like Jeremy Swayman. That
Not in the
that
NHL yet, at
right.
least.
Like, well, no, but what can that do for a team? Marchand's a future Hall of Famer. Pasternak probably on his way for the type of numbers he's going to produce over his career.
On a good pace for sure.
Right. McAvoy's really good. One like I said, you probably pretty easily. I would feel pretty safe saying probably top 5 at the position.
If there is but also laying the
Certainly
foundation for
top
a Hall
10.
of Fame. Oh, right.
Right.
Also laying the foundation for a Hall of Fame career.
See,
Not
I don't
there
know if I
yet,
go.
but
Yeah, I don't know if I go that far with McAvoy. Like it's too early, but
sure. But
no,
he's
but
young.
what I
He's young
struggle
enough.
with,
He's
sure.
young enough that if he's
What I
still there on
struggle,
the other side of the rebuild, yeah.
what I struggle with is, or not struggle with, like this is where this is more easy for me to put McAvoy in this category. Is I don't know that I can name 9 defensemen better than McAvoy in the league. Like,
Okay.
there are obvious names I would put ahead of McAvoy. I think Makar is better. I would
think
say
if you're taking handedness out of it and you're just talking defenseman, I think I can get to 10. If you're talking about his role specifically, I think you're there. Okay.
well, it's probably a little bit of both. I just think he's been one of the more consistent parts of that team, the league in general. You know, like I would say like honestly, I think I would put McAvoy ahead of any defenseman in Buffalo right now. And Dahlin's really good, but it doesn't mean like I would probably pick McAvoy first.
Man,
Dahlin's the only one who would even have a chance to surpass McAvoy, by the way,
at this
from
point in time,
that
yeah,
roster.
I agree.
It's not Fireman, it's not Power. Like,
I think if Power had the thing about Buffalo is that
well,
if
it could
any of those
change.
players had been developed properly,
Well,
it's a whole
that's
different
why
animal.
why do you think I just said that could change?
Right. If you're okay, if you are asking me right now, I'm NHL 25. We are fantasy drafting the entire NHL, and
Right.
I have to pick one of those two players. I
Between
might take
McAvoy and Dahlin, we're doing?
yes. I might take Dahlin, but it might only be because he's younger.
That's valid.
And
if you're telling me to fantasy draft based on who I think is going to give you more over the course of the season, I'm probably taking McAvoy.
I agree. If the goal in mind is to build the best franchise, I think I'm taking Dahlin because I think there's a little bit more there. There's a little bit more size.
Fair.
If you're asking me to win a Stanley Cup this year, I'm taking Charlie McAvoy.
Well, there you go. And that's why I said I don't know. Like, I'm trying to put go with, like I said, I'm trying to figure out who else you would put ahead of McAvoy over the course of this thing. Like I said, Makar's probably there. I would still put Yossi ahead of him. Yossi's definitely there.
Quinn
Um,
Hughes, we're going
Quinn
to win the
Hughes
Norris this year.
probably,
Won it
yeah.
last
Quinn
year.
Hughes probably. I would
Probably. Come on.
definitely, yeah. Well, he won the Norris. I get it.
Okay. And
Um,
he's probably
I
going to win it this year.
you think Hughes is winning the Norris this year?
Yeah, absolutely. He's been insane.
Um,
Unless that team completely falls apart, which is a possibility, I think Quinn Hughes is really, yeah. I put Adam
does he
Fox
have
ahead of
the?
him.
Typically, I agree with you. I do think Fox has had a very down season this year. It's definitely like for his standards, he is not having the year that you would expect. That's all I'm saying. Like and then again, is anybody on the Rangers having that kind of year? I mean, you could, Shesterkin's great. We all
Exactly.
know Shesterkin's great, and I think you could even qualify that he may not even be having the type of year you would expect from him. Like he's not. Shesterkin is not going to end up in the Vezina conversation this year, probably.
I agree. No, I agree.
Only because
Unless
and only because there are other goalies that have played better. It doesn't even mean his numbers are bad.
No, I agree. I agree.
It's just there's other guys who have played better. All right, we're still on defensemen though, right? So
Would
like
you
I said,
would you take Brock Faber?
Not yet.
Man,
Like
it's getting there. It's
well,
getting pretty close for me,
not
man.
today. I love the foundation of his game though. I think he's a very talented young defenseman. I'll tell you
It's
somebody
not
who comes
today, maybe tomorrow, man. Brock Faber's coming.
I got to tell you, somebody who comes very close. And actually, you know what? Quinn Hughes has had a really good year.
Okay.
You're right. You know who my pick for Norris might be this year, though?
Okay.
I think you got to give some serious love this year to Zach Werenski. He's had a killer year, and let's not overlook what Columbus has done over the last maybe month or so. And because, do you want me to repeat myself?
Atrocious.
Do you want me to repeat? There's a path right now. If Columbus kind of pulls Flyers of last year, they're probably in the race for a while.
People are floating Ivan Provorov's name, and by the way, I don't have him above Charlie McAvoy in case you're wondering.
No.
But people are floating his name as a potential trade target.
Who, Werenski?
Provorov.
Oh, Provorov. Okay, I was gonna say.
And if they're still in the race, why would you? Like, listen.
I think that was more popular about a month ago.
We all know what that team has gone through this year.
Mm-hmm.
A playoff run would be sick. A playoff run would be sick. I'll go ahead and say it. That would be awesome. I'm
agreeing with you. I'm doing the defenseman look. So.
Oh yeah, no. Okay, so if we're still doing defenseman, okay. So we have Miro Heiskanen.
By the way,
I think that one's pretty.
Miro Heiskanen, to me, he's not a point producer by any stretch of the imagination. That probably puts him more top 10 than top 5 because people love the points. I get it.
Okay.
I would say
to
me
he's McAvoy.
Oh, I take Heiskanen all day.
Okay.
Because you know what? I don't know if stylistically something would change. I have no idea if things would be different if he wasn't on the team he was on, and I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm saying that as a positive. You don't need Miro Heiskanen to put up a ton of points. You've got guys who put up points. You know what you need? You know what you need Heiskanen to do? Get him the puck from his zone to the offensive zone. Just move it and then play as stellar defense as you can imagine, because he is absolutely he might be one of the truly, when we talk Norris and the points come into play, I don't know that Quinn Hughes is the best defensive defenseman. He's a good mobile defenseman. That puts him in that running because he helps his team produce equally as much as he probably can defend. Heiskanen's all defend. He's probably Heiskanen's probably a top 3 defender in the league. Not defenseman, but defender.
Like
from defensive zone awareness, he's probably top 3 in the league. Easy. Okay. And he is a joy to watch play. And as I just got the chance to.
And he has quite a bit of offensive skill as well. Like, yes, I agree that he is an elite defender as far as the NHL level goes. But that kid can that kid can move the puck.
Like, do you know where Heiskanen ranks in points this year?
She's doing okay, isn't he? I don't know off the top of my head.
No, that's actually it. He's not doing okay in point
Really?
production. He
Really?
has well, it's a tie, but still, he's 41st in the league in points among defensemen. Not all players, just defensemen.
Right. No, I gotcha. Yeah. I mean,
He's got this. Do you want to know who has the same number of, and like, I'm not even kidding, down to it's exactly the same goals and assists?
okay.
Riker Evans for Seattle, who you probably didn't even know is on this list somewhere.
I'd probably take him over Charlie McAvoy too. No, I'm kidding. Other names worth mentioning here. I'm just kind of glancing around the league a little bit. Would you take either of the Vegas defensemen, Pietrangelo or Theodore?
Over McAvoy? And Pietrangelo's right there.
Okay.
You know, because Pietrangelo is just there's a difference. Like I might lean Pietrangelo. Well, Pietrangelo is not necessarily a big points guy either. He's just steady too.
And that's the thing about
I probably lean McAvoy from the equation that you bring up, that you brought up with Darlene, which is McAvoy's clearly the younger guy. If I'm building a franchise today, I'm probably trying to get a McAvoy over a Pietrangelo because.
But if you're trying to
just
win
for time's sake, I probably want Pietrangelo.
Okay.
Yeah, if I'm trying to win this year, I probably want Pietrangelo on that team.
Jacob Slavin.
Well, and Shea Theodore is a really good producer, by the way. Jacob Slavin's really consistent. I do like him a lot.
You're talking about Miro Heiskanen being one of the best defenders in the league.
Oh, Slavin's among them too.
Jacob Slavin might be one of the best defenders. Again, being different from defensemen that we've seen since the 05 lockout. Like since the rules changed.
Right. Yeah. Josh Morrissey's another guy you got to bring into that conversation too. He's been really good.
Yeah. So
Sergachev. But you get Sergachev's been really good too. But so you get my point. Like
Charlie McAvoy sucks. That's your point?
No. It's no, but you're trying to talk about a conversation like I was trying to remember how we even got to this to begin with, which was Travis Konechny and Brad Marchand. Yes. And like the comparison of the two and things like that. And Marchand's older. Like that's why I'm just saying, like, it's really hard to envision where Boston goes down the line when you've got McAvoy, you've got Pasternak, you've got your goalie, you've got Swayman. Whenever Marchand's done, like, they got some work to do to get some other guys in there. It doesn't mean they don't have some decent players, but I got to tell you, a lot of times when I watch one of their games, it's the same guys scoring a lot of the goals.
Well, and
Morgan Geeky's having a really good year, is he not? I think he's having a really solid for what his role is.
Absolutely.
He's scoring a lot lately, and there's a lot of guys that aren't on that roster.
Well, and the Boston Bruins kind of have that problem that a lot of good teams have at the end of their window, right? We saw the Chicago Blackhawks go through it. We saw the Detroit Red Wings go through it. Now we're seeing them go through it. Is that you've just spent so much time and so many picks, and so many of your trades are sending future assets out for current assets now, that eventually you just kind of run out of steam and there's nothing in the tank. When those big guys go, it's going to take them a while. Like when the Bruins crash, and it's coming within the next 3-4 years, it's coming. And when that crash hits, it's going to hurt.
Sure. Can I tell you, because people aren't going to believe this? Well, they will, because they will, because there's one key reason why this is the way that it is, and why one team is in the playoff picture today, and why one of them isn't. Do you know how many, like, at this point in time, if every time I do a game, and the Flyers don't play the Bruins for the rest of the year, so this will never happen for the rest of this season. Like, you're not going to see this. I don't have a preview to do, but when I do a game preview, I put the team leaders in points up, and it's the top 5 every game. I highlight who the top 5 are. And so right now we've kind of gotten into the territory of it gets pretty consistent night over. Like there are usually, like, the beginning of the year, you have guys swapping positions every other night because one big game changes things. Then it starts to get consistent. Well, this guy got more points. This guy, you know what I mean?
The team rises to the top.
So on, right. Well, no. So my point being, so now for the Flyers, every time, nothing is changing, particularly with the top 3, probably for a while. Konechny, Mishkov, Tippett. Lawton is 4th at 23 points. Sanheim is 5th at 22. And then you have a couple of others that are like under the surface that could emerge into the top 5 with like one really good week or something like that, right? So I just read off, by the way, Sanheim's at 22 and 5th on the team. Morgan Frost is 6th at 21 points. Sean Couturier is 7th at 20 points, and that's the 20 goal. They're 20-point guys on the Flyers. 20 points well, by this point, 43 games, I believe, is what they're up to now. Not overly impressive, right?
Not a spectacular pace for guys.
So you look at the Flyers with those point totals, and you look at the Flyers where they are in the standings, and you go, makes sense, right? And you would look at the Bruins in the standings and think, well, they're just a deeper team. Of course they are. They got more players than the Flyers do, right?
They have a goalie, right?
Well, they do have the goalie. That's where I'm going to go with this conversation, because here, let's start with this. The leading point guy on the Bruins is David Pastrnak. That is no surprise, right? You want to know what might sound like a surprise? David Pastrnak has 19 goals and 26 assists for 45 points in 45 games this season. And Travis Konechny has 20 goals and 50 points in 43 games this season.
Is that good?
It's pretty darn good, right?
Is that where they get on Team Canada?
Well, but beside the point, Brad Marchand has 15 goals and 33 points in 45 games this season. That's second on the team. The guy who's second on the Flyers has 13 goals and 30 points and has played 41 games.
Would that be
a
20? I was gonna say, would that be a 20-year-old Russian kid?
It is.
Okay. Interesting.
There are 2 players tied for third on the Bruins in points. Pavel Zacha and Elias Lindholm. Okay. No surprises by the names, right?
Well,
Zacha has 9 goals and 21 points. Lindholm has 7 goals and 21 points. The guy who is third on the Flyers in points is Owen Tippett, who has 13 and 13 for 26. So the guy in third place in points on the Flyers this season,
5 points up,
has 5 more points in fewer games, 2 fewer, than the 2 guys tied for third on the Bruins.
It's bad in Boston right now. Yeah.
Scott Lawton's 4th on the Flyers, which we just said there's a tie, right? So 3rd and 4th is the same in Boston. Scott Lawton's 4th on the Flyers in points at 23.
Still more.
Travis Sanheim is 5th on the Flyers in points at 22.
Wow. The entire Flyers top 5. Wow.
Why are the Bruins in the playoffs right now? His name's Jeremy Swayman.
Yep. And he's
and Korpisalo hasn't been bad, by the way. I don't want to make Korpisalo out to be like a just like a total sieve.
And Swayman got a little bit of a late start, had a little bit of a hard time getting going the first week or two, and has still been probably their most important player through the remaining, 30
and here's the thing.
Whatever.
He's in because of goaltending, right? Or they're in right now. They're in a playoff position because of goaltending, right?
Yep.
Jeremy Swayman's numbers are a 2.91 goals against average and an 895 save percentage. What does that tell you? League average goaltending. What was the title of the last show?
League average goaltending. That's all you need. That's all you need. Yep.
An 895 save percentage might have the Flyers in the playoffs. Seriously, they have an 8 as a team. What do they have? I can pull it up in 2 seconds because they do this for every single game. They give you the whole list of what their team goaltending is. They have a 347 goals against average and an 870 save percentage, and that includes the shutout that Sam Ersson gave you on Saturday, making 22 saves, which boosted his save percentage back up to 888, which actually sounds modestly respectable.
But I was actually just going to make that transition to talk about that game because.
Do you want to just? By the way, do you want me to just gloss over the Dallas game and that it just was flat out start to finish was bad?
As usual.
Not Dallas sucks. Now listen, that is a statement that can be very true for one sport. It is not true for the one that was going on Thursday night. That Dallas team does not suck.
Dallas sucks.
But But
Regardless,
the
Miro Heiskanen and the Dallas Stars came into town and
Dallas Stars do
just
not. I was gonna say the Dallas Stars do not suck.
no. Playing against them sucks.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
really good team.
Yes.
I feel very watching them play that game. I still feel very good about like my thoughts on them in the playoffs.
Picking the Rangers on the other side for me was not a great look. Not a great look.
I feel good. I feel good about my Cup final pick.
Who'd you have there?
I put Florida back.
Oh, you did put Florida back. Okay.
I still feel good about that. I mean,
listen,
and it's
that
funny.
Feels solid. The Rangers not so much.
No, but it's funny because now they are, I guess, because Dallas has won more than just a game in Philly, but like they're now back up to top 7 in the league. But at the time, I think they came in ranked 10th, and Florida's ranked 11th right now in the league. But I feel really good about both of them. Like it's like both of those teams feel like they're going to be the one. Like there is also something to be said for, take your pick on some of these teams. Most of the teams that are there have some form of playoff experience, but there is going to be something to be said like Minnesota being up where they are. It's going to be different though. Like when you get into playoff time and you play somebody, maybe you play Dallas.
They're going to make it add. Minnesota's going to add.
Oh, for sure.
And I think they're going to be adding some veteran leadership. And keep an eye. If the Rangers do anything drastic and a name like Chris Kreider gets on his way out the door, look for Minnesota. Because holy smokes, he's going to be good in Minnesota.
Speaking of trades that the Rangers make.
Okay.
You want to go into that?
Well, yeah. So we mentioned
Anaheim Ducks looking good on Saturday.
Well, we did see Jacob Trouba. We saw Jacob
did
Trouba
we?
on Saturday. Well,
I don't remember seeing him at all. I guess he was dressed for the game. I don't remember.
And there was a bunch of rough stuff. Don't you think that like a big intimidating guy who like throws a bunch of hits would be impactful in a game like that?
Yeah, his name was Radko Gudas.
Yeah, no kidding. Man, listen, I know that the fly.
Okay. We were all waiting for Trouba to be the one to do the stupid thing. It turned out it was, and it wasn't stupid per se, but it turned out Gudas was the one who got into it more than Trouba ever did.
Well, and I think that has a lot to do with that letter on his chest, to be honest.
Sure it does, but that game, Trouba, like probably like most of them, that game was probably just going through the motions.
So we talked about the fact a couple weeks ago when the Flyers played the Ducks in Anaheim that for 38 of the 40 dressed players, it's not really a big deal. It's a big deal for Cutter Gauthier because he's decided to make it a big deal. And it's a big deal for Jamie Drysdale playing against his old team and, playing in his old rink and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. The one in Anaheim specifically.
This game, a lot more than 2 players cared about this game. And maybe it's
the players cared
weeks ago. Right. Maybe it's because they played a couple weeks ago and it was a bit of a media story. Maybe the Flyers finally kind of heard the comments that Gauthier made the first time around and it didn't really sit all that well.
No, I think it straight up comes back to Friday. They had a practice. He says something about how it's more of a media driven thing and kind like there's things about him.
After they had their practice completely closed off to the public. They did not open the building at all.
Well, they weren't practicing at one of the normal places anyway. They were like it was a stretch.
It was like a UPenn rink. I know.
Yes, but either way, like, and this is a big topic of conversation, like the morning of the game too, where it's like, if you're gonna come out and say something along the lines of, if people only knew what the truth was or whatever, and then don't divulge into the truth.
Right. It's like
you're like it's right there for you to tell your own story. If you don't want to get into it, listen, I'm not even saying he has to get into it. You don't have to get into the details if you don't want to. But
stop being childish and go, don't ask me about it. I wish you knew, but I can't tell you.
And it's not even, but it's not even about that. You're in a situation now where, listen, you can either, you don't even have the choice anymore, kind of, because you can either continue to sit there and say, not even if people only knew, but like just sit there and say, I don't want to talk about it. That's fine. You know who did want to talk about it the night that you were traded? Everybody in the front office of the team that traded you. Danny Briere went on television. Keith Jones went on the radio, I think, or vice versa. They circled the wagons that night with someone's going on podcast. Right. Somebody's going on TV, somebody's going on radio, somebody's going on the team sanctioned podcast.
Yep.
And we're going to
we are
talk about this,
blasting this
and
kid.
we are going to sit there and explain from our side what happened. And
that we sent Patrick Sharp, we sent John LeClaire, and this kid refused to even meet with them. That he wouldn't tell us why he wanted out. He wouldn't let us know why. He just decided he didn't want to be here anymore.
right, and until you and I like one of the things I come back to a lot with this is you'll find out the answer to this 25 years from now.
Yep.
When Cutter Gauthier inevitably goes and it's funny because we actually had to laugh about this because the joke was goes on Spittin' Chicklets or the equivalent, depending on what's around in 25 years. It could very well still be Chicklets.
The Paul Bissonnette podcast starring Paul Bissonnette, sponsored by Manscaped.
Something. Who cares? Whatever it is. But inevitably, years down the line, when his career is long since over, and Cutter Gauthier goes on and tells stories of some kind, that may be when you finally get an answer to this thing. But you're not going to find out right now. And if that's the case,
find out. Yep.
If that's the case, then people are going to run with the one thing that they know, which is he didn't meet with anybody, because that's what the Flyers have said. He wouldn't meet with us. He didn't return calls. He didn't want to talk, all that stuff. And that's what's going to be the story.
And I will say, we all talked about the fact that we respected what Danny Briere did. He didn't publicize the fact that this kid wanted out before the trade was made. He did not blast the kid publicly in the media and make a whole big thing out of it. He traded him. He said he didn't want to be here. He wouldn't tell us why. And we're done.
Right.
And here we are,
and actually,
a year later. Yep. Go ahead.
Well, and actually, to be fair, nobody's really talked about it since.
Not at all.
Danny didn't want to talk about it. Jonesy didn't want to talk about it. Torts most certainly does not want to talk about it. And that's the end of that. Like, let's play hockey. And they sure did that night, and that's the thing, right? Like, look, there is no denying. And this is the thing. Like, there are people who are sitting here. Like, I saw people with comments towards John Tortorella after the game on social media about how, because he didn't want to talk about the energy in the building being the thing about this kid, right? Like, I thought his answer was
John Tortorella is not going to come out and crap on a child.
It's no, it wasn't even about that. His thing is from his perspective, he wasn't thinking about the guy on the other side. He was thinking about his own team. This was about playing a game. I wanted us to play our game, to just come out and have a good game. I'm worried about our guys. That was all there was to it. The rest of the stuff is for, and he's right. Your opinion of John Tortorella can be whatever the hell you want it to be. I don't care. You can love him. You can hate him. You can be in between on it. He's right. It is media stirred in terms of not the story. The reasoning behind what happens, it is not media driven when one guy won't speak on the matter and one team did address it and left it at that, right? Then that's the story we're going to go with about what happened until there's more to the story to be had. Straightforward. But the drama surrounding the game, the anticipation of this game, and it's Cutter against the Flyers is completely media driven. Absolutely it is. And it's fan driven. It has nothing to do with the individual team per se, because he's not on that team.
Well, here's my thing. I agree with you in theory most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw Travis Konechny chirping with him between whistles. I saw Scott Lawton in his face. I saw Matvei Mishkov challenging him to a fight just so very clearly.
Yeah, I don't know if it was as clearly as Konechny did, but okay.
Come on, man. He was skating backwards from him, shaking his hands. Like, come on, man.
Now, see, what I find interesting about that dynamic, by the way, is okay. Travis Konechny's here last year. Gets like let's put it this way. Even after they circle the PR wagon, if you will, and Danny Briere does two different parts of this. Talks to us after the first period, then they do intermission at one point, right, on TV, radio, whatever it was. Jonesy does TV. Hilferty goes over, does Snow the goalie. Okay, all that they circle the PR wagons. Even after the game was over, Travis Sanheim said something about it, and like don't know him that well, like don't know much about him, but if he didn't want to be here, we don't want you here kind of thing. Like said the same thing. And John Tortorella then comes out and was asked questions and goes, please, I want to talk about Jamie. I don't want to talk about the guy who isn't here.
And that's kind of what I'm saying is like, you can say it's media driven. I understand that. It's questions
The
from
hype
media.
is.
It's talking to the kid. It's things he said in the media and the clips that he said. And I understand all of that. But to say that the players don't care, and you didn't say that,
I'm not,
but I just in general, to this is not a normal game for the players.
No, it was not a normal game. I
Right.
give you that.
They knew the building was going to be fired up. They knew the energy was going to be high. They knew there were going to be some hits. They knew that this game, as much as a Flyers Ducks game in January can feel like right now,
Yeah.
they knew this was going to feel like a playoff
Well,
game.
let me spin it this way, okay? John Tortorella doesn't care about that. He's coaching the team. He's just trying to prep them for another game in January at relatively speaking, a critical point of their season. You know, all things considered. We can talk about where they are, what they're going to be, whatever it may be.
He's looking for 2 points on a Saturday night. That's all.
Yes, correct.
Yep.
I think your point is more valid from a player's perspective because they have to go out and actually do it. And then if you have more energy, yes, that can be driven by a lot of factors on, you know, from the energy in the building, from who's on the other side, however you want to spin it. John Tortorella really does not care about anybody on the other side. He's not the one out there doing anything within the game. And
no, he did a great job because he alluded to, we need to play important enough games that the building always.
That's where I like the answer, though.
Yep.
Yes, the building was great. I want it to mean something more, that it doesn't have to do with some kid on the other side and has to do with we're good enough to earn it every single night, especially in April to June.
I was going to say, I want to be doing this in late May for a trip to the Stanley Cup final. Right. That's the game. That's why John Tortorella wants the Wells Fargo Center to be rocked.
And I don't know, like, I genuinely think that there's a part, like, and this wasn't asked of him, and it's not going to be because it really is neither here nor there at this given point in time. But I genuinely think there's a part of him giving that answer that says, like, in the back of his mind that goes, and I'm not going to be the one standing on the bench for it.
I don't know because I think everything we've seen out of John Tortorella is, man, I know I've said a lot on this show. I have been a John Tortorella apologist here for a very long time. I think he has a really good picture of where this team's at.
I think he does too. What I'm saying, I think you're making it seem like I'm saying he may be just kicked out of this picture.
No. What I'm saying is I think he knows how close this team is. And I think but when I say that, I think they are buying into his system. I think you've seen improvements out of basically every player who's been here since day one of John Tortorella is way better than they were when he got here. Sean Couturier may be an exception, but that's asterisk.
See, and I don't know that I agree with that statement at all.
Okay.
I don't think because I can't watch, like, okay, they play some really good competitive games. I agree with that. They go out and they lay an egg like they did against Dallas, and Dallas is a way better team. I'm not saying that they're not, but you just played Toronto that way, and Toronto was actually better in the standings than Dallas was. You just flat out didn't have it from the very first second of that game. And there are elements of what they try to do. There's elements of what they try to do that, one, just don't work because you're not skilled enough. And then there's elements of what they try to do that almost fall too much into the Tortorella system of defense to offense. Like, I've said it before, where there's times where I don't care how much John Tortorella wants to say, I'm not trying to make a guy a checker. It's still part of the equation in his system. You've got to be a little bit grindy just to succeed. They're not fast. Let's be clear. I mean, they've got a handful of guys that are, but they're not fast.
I agree with that.
And you start to watch, like, I'm not trying to segue to looking ahead I'm not trying to segue to looking ahead right now, but watch Florida on a power, like Florida making seam passes left and right on a power play yesterday against Boston. And it's like, the Flyers are nowhere near that level of a team. They don't make passes that quick. They don't move that quick. They don't have enough skill like that.
I
It
agree.
is not even remotely close to what it needs to be. And I'm
But
just saying I don't know that John Tortorella is going to stay on a bench long enough in his coaching career before he decides I want to slow myself down. And so
and if that's
that's
the
why I'm
case,
saying I think he knows that atmosphere was great. I
sure.
want that to be the atmosphere in a playoff series when it comes around. That's always the goal. And
Right.
I don't
Well,
know that I'm
if
going to be here for it. I think that's why last year was so disappointing and so important, and why he felt like he had no answers at the end of the season because
well,
he wanted it to get there. They were in the
listen,
position, and he wanted it to get there because he knew what was coming if they had home games in the playoffs.
I
They
I
didn't
agree.
get there.
And I think that grindy defensive style that he's been teaching this team for the last 3 years is a style that's going to be effective in the playoffs once this team makes it there. Now, I think that's what he's doing is we are instilling the habits, we are getting everything locked in.
But I think you need to.
I think you've seen improvements out of your defensemen. I think you've seen Travis Sanheim make massive improvements in his game. I think you've seen steps up from Cam York. I think Jamie Drysdale has become a better overall defenseman under John Tortorella. And I think that if a playoff series is going to happen, obviously you'd like. Okay, I don't necessarily think it's going to happen this year. We've talked about it up and down. I know I picked them to make the playoffs, but realistically, I'm not sure if it's happening at this point. But
I mean,
as this team
they're
moves,
still 5 points out as we speak, so
I
it's
know
like,
the East is all everybody sucks. We talk about this all the time. Um,
yeah, I know.
as we move into the second, the future years of the rebuild, right? Theoretically, you start populating some more talent throughout your roster, and that's upgrading, some of your top spots, some of your depth spots. You kind of just upgrade all throughout the roster.
Mm-hmm.
But I think John Tortorella is putting the bones in there, and I think when I think if you went back and asked Danny Briere who he would hire as the head coach after Alain Vigneault got fired, he's not the general manager yet. He doesn't really, but he's kind of hanging around and he has an idea what's going on.
Right.
I don't know if he would have picked John Tortorella because I think he would have been more rebuild focused straight from the beginning. But having Tortorella in there, I think Danny Briere sees what he's doing. I think he sees the passion with which he's doing it. And I think at this point in time, you trust John Tortorella to take you as far as John Tortorella wants to take you.
Well, I want okay, so this is a good time to go into the halfway discussion. We'll do more on Cutter and the night at Wells Fargo Center on Saturday because it was absolutely an atmosphere that is not going to be topped this year by any stretch, right? Um, I want to bring up two different things for a second, okay? Because let's start with this to get to the halfway point, and I'm cutting it 2 games short, but like I'm going just through Tuesday when they actually reach the halfway point. So this team started 4-8-1 through 13 games, and obviously it was worse in the early going. It was 1-5-1, right? Like 6 or 7 games in, they had won the first game of the season, then they lost 6 in a row. Then they get to the 25 game mark, having gone 8-2-2 since November 7th, and are 12-10-3. Way better than 4-8-1, obviously. Like that's a really good month. Since December 5th, when they came back from having a little pause at the end of after the end of November, they were 5-9-2 through Tuesday at the 41 game mark. That gave them a 17-19-5 record. And I think that as that record played out, because I don't think there was anybody having really any problem with anything that was going on November 30th when Michkov has scored in overtime for the 3rd time in the month, and the team is now won 8 of 12, and they're 12-10-3, and people kind of were almost in acceptance of they're probably going to be close to the same thing they were last year. They're in a wild card race. They're not one of the top 3 in the Metro, but they're in the wild card race and they're going to be there, right?
They're going to be around.
Right. They're going to be around. Then you go, and it really was like beyond 5-9-2, you lose the next one, no less, and you go 5-10-2 since December 5th, are sitting at 17-20-5. now pushing the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings, no less. And everybody out there wants a move to be made. Why isn't Danny doing anything? Why aren't you trying to do this? Why aren't you trying to do that? All that stuff like that. And I don't think people do well in sports, or sometimes in general, but certainly in sports. People don't do well with complex situations that have complex answers. There is no easy answer to rebuilding. If there was an easy answer to rebuilding, everybody would do it. If what
there's no blueprint.
Well, if what Buffalo did for 10 years worked, 2 first overall picks, 2 second overall picks, 4 8th overall picks, you pick in the top 10 a bunch of times, you get a bunch of really good players, you start winning games. Everybody would do it. Everybody would do it if it worked, right?
Well, and if what the Rangers tried worked, right? You just kind of shotgun a rebuild and you get a couple of top 3 picks and then you just turn it around real quick and boom, you're back.
Well, if it was even that clear,
that doesn't always necessarily.
Well, if it was
work,
even that clear cut to get
this year.
Right, if it was even that clear cut to win the lottery.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Like if it was that easy to do the lottery thing all the time, everybody would do it. Right.
Being the owner of the New York Rangers probably helps.
Well, either way.
I'm joking.
But either way, my point being, everybody wants an easy answer. And I think that partially, one of the things I think that also partially stems from is Matvei Michkov was pretty much the only change that was made from one season to the next. Pretty much the only thing that was different about this team from last year to this year. Just about.
At the end of last year. Beginning of last year, that team had Carter Hart and Sean Walker.
Well, all right. Yeah, but what do people what do people remember? Do they remember what it was like at the beginning of the year? Do they remember that they were in a playoff spot with 9 games to go and then blew it?
No, I know.
That's what people remember. And now that this season has gone the way that it has to this point, that they are clearly a below 500 team, in the bottom portion of the standings or whatever, and the goaltending is such a struggle, and the depth is still a struggle, and the lack of skill is a struggle. Well, maybe the depth isn't a struggle because they have a lot of guys that probably fit the bill of middle six and middle pairing and blah, blah, blah. I think what it comes down to is, like, people have been here, like, and like Scott Lawton's name is one that comes up a ton with this situation. But do you know why? Because you've been hearing Scott Lawton's name since 2012. And the more that you hear the same people over and over and over again in a rebuild, then how much of a rebuild really is it? And I'm not criticizing their rebuild for saying that. I'm saying people want like what happens when or in general, whether when your team's doing poorly in a situation or whatever the case may be, you want something different with it. You want to try something different. I'm getting rid of this guy. I'm moving this guy to this spot. I'm trying to do this. When things go stale in a baseball season, you're not necessarily moving roster players, but you either call up somebody or you say, I'm moving this guy in the lineup because I got to try something different. Whatever it may be. And change happens because of that. And people want to see it. I think that that's part of where it stems from. But like, people get really caught up in the middle picks being the mediocre picks or whatever it is. Do you let me read off something to you that I just looked into in general, and I found it shocking because who would you say are some of the first names that come up of people that the fan base would be ready to move tomorrow?
Well, Morgan Frost is gone.
Okay. He's not the name I have in mind because he doesn't fit into the equation the same way. He kind of is what he is to a totally different degree.
Talking about our Scott Lawtons, our
Farabee. All right, there you go. Stop there.
Okay.
That's the name that I have written down for a reason, okay? Because Morgan Frost probably is what he is, and he's gonna, he ranks where he does in everything, and same thing with Scott Lawton. Joel Farabee was a 14th overall pick, correct? In 2018.
Yep.
Okay. Does he feel like somebody who you come away with and say that guy was a top draft pick, or is a guy who, somebody who has made an impact?
Has he blossomed into the superstar he probably should, drafted in the top half of the first round? Is that what you're asking?
Not necessarily, because no, because I think people equate anything from 11 to 20 in a draft and go, that becomes the guy who just slots into your second, third line and is what he is after a certain point. That's, Morgan Frost was drafted 27th overall. Scott Lawton was 20th, I think. 21st. You don't get the premier player. Like, you very rarely get the premier players by picking 20 something, right?
And if you do, it's a gem, right?
Right, sure, like Claude Giroux.
Yep.
You get a Claude Giroux at 22nd, 20, whatever it is. Oh wow, what a hit that turned out to be. David Pastrnak was that level. David Pastrnak was picked 25th overall, I think is what it was in his draft year, and it's like you don't expect that guy to be one of the top players in the NHL when it comes down to it, and he is, right? Okay, now I am looking at a draft where Joel Farabee goes 14th overall, and I just want to read off the first maybe. I'll do a handful of names because I'll pick names out that we recognize as probably top players from that draft, right?
I'm sure some of those players have not played in the NHL, and that's not
right. We've actually mentioned, by the way, already. We've actually mentioned 2 of these names already in the show. Believe it or not.
Robert, it's a different name here, but wasn't Robert Thomas drafted right around Joel Farabee?
I don't even know if that was that draft year.
Was he not? Okay, I thought he was. Okay.
No.
Might have been after that. Okay.
No, for context, like the pick right before Joel Farabee was Ty Dellandrea, who's playing for San Jose and doesn't even have 200 NHL games yet. Okay.
And struggled in Dallas's system for a while.
Right. Now, that's actually not a bad way to lead into the point I'm going to make, but the names that you'll recognize anyway. The first overall pick in 2018 was Rasmus Dahlin.
Okay.
Number 2 was Andrei Svechnikov. Number 3 was Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Number 4 was Brady Tkachuk. Number 5 was Barrett Hayton. Now I'll scatter around to the names you recognize.
Yeah.
Number 7 was Quinn Hughes. Number 10 was Evan Bouchard. We're talking about a draft that also had I'm trying to go through and find like a name that actually kind of has stood out from below that portion of draft. Keandre Miller was in that draft. He was a good pick.
Took him a little bit to get to the NHL. Bit of a slow track.
Like even this one's a good, like, because he's not having a bad year, all things considered. Kirill Marchenko was 49th overall. That's a guy who's turned into a bit of something right there, right? In Columbus.
Right, but what was that phrase there? Turned into a bit of something. Joel Farabee was on this team pretty right away.
Right. Well,
and,
yeah, you know why?
It was contributing at the NHL level
pretty
quickly.
You know why? Because you're ready to, like, there's a lot of fans out there. People are ready to move on from Lawton, move on from Frost, move on from Farabee, because it's just what keeps you in the middle, right? It's not like they're not NHLers. They're not great. No. They're not the great NHLers. They're not the high skill NHLers that you're going to need. Like, and Frost and I don't even want to say that because Frost has ability, right? He's got that kind of ability. It's just nowhere near consistent enough. That's the problem.
So does Joel Farabee, to be honest. I mean, we've seen flashes.
But my point, so my point is that when it comes down to it, these guys that you kind of picture as are what they are, and Farabee was scratched, by the way, on Saturday too. For what
he loved that.
Joel Farabee from that draft year, his career numbers, by the way, he's played in 376 career games. That's 6th among that draft class.
Believe that. And is it behind most of the top 5 and Quinn Hughes?
It is behind, exactly. It is behind Tkachuk, Dahlin, Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi, and Hughes.
Crazy. Guys
he is in front of names like Noah Dobson, Keandre Miller, Yegor Sharangovich. I mean, the number 6 pick in that draft was Philip Zadina, who never latched on to become anything with any, like, especially that Detroit rebuild.
Every year in the draft, there are a crop of guys who you go, oh yeah, they're definitely NHLers. And
right.
sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 8 or 9, like somewhere in that mix. And then after that crop of automatic, oh, he's going to play 800 games. Then there's another 100 to 200 players who have the potential, who have the chance. And some amount of them always do. Joel Farabee has done so, and has done so more successfully than pretty much anybody else from that draft up to this point.
Right. Now, here's the thing. You can play a lot of games in the NHL and just not be as effective. Right. So, like, what good is saying, oh, he's played the sixth, right? I said sixth most games of that draft class. What good is that if he doesn't put up any points during the process?
Right.
How about he ranks 7th in that draft class in points?
Yep.
Behind the same 4 of the same that I mentioned: Tkachuk, Hughes, Svechnikov, Dahlin. He's behind Noah Dobson, which, let's face it, Dobson played on an Islanders team for a handful of seasons that had more
Really
that.
good.
Well, that made deep playoff runs for that matter. Dobson was already there when that was going on. He wasn't the top guy yet, but he was getting there, and he clearly
He
had
didn't
the
have
skill
to be.
set.
Yeah.
Right. And then he's behind. Okay, he's 7 points behind Evan Bouchard, who only gets to play on a power play with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Right. No,
okay, so that's right. Like Joel Farabee and I'm trying to do the quick math. It's not going to be great, but I'll just try to get a rough estimate for you on this one. In probably close to 70 fewer games than Jesperi Kotkaniemi, has almost 20 more points. I think it's 17 more points.
And Kotkaniemi is a guy who we talked about, like, got offer sheeted and was a big part of like major league drama for a while.
Right.
So it's just interesting that Joel Farabee is just kind of a guy.
Now, by the way, I mentioned he's 7th in points, right?
Yep.
Okay. Among the players in front of him in points, 4 of them are defensemen who probably pick up a chunk of their points from, if you're on a power play with a super skilled forward like a McDavid, for example. If you're Quinn Hughes, who plays on a power play with Pettersson, Miller, Besser, you're going to get, like, how many points did Quinn Hughes get last year from, hey, I play on a really good power play, I play on an overtime unit with,
absolute piles of them.
Right. Yeah. Even Dahlin, right?
Yeah.
How many times? It's not as skilled, but
that elite Buffalo power play.
No, but how many times do you get points from being more on a power play than you do in general, or playing in overtime, or playing, in general, right?
No, I get what you're saying for sure, and like,
well, no, so here's what I am saying: goal scoring.
Yeah.
Brady Tkachuk is at the top. Brady Tkachuk, for what it's worth, is the best player out of, like, if you were redrafting, he's number 1. Right. 180 goals, 387 points. He leads in both categories. That is no surprise.
And how many pins? And I don't expect you to have it, but like,
I do, because it's listed.
Okay.
I love a good. You know what? This is cracking me up because I love a good round number. 700 on the dot.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Brady.
In 400 in 481 games, which I believe also is leading that class.
Because Brady Tkachuk's one of those players that you can list the goals and assists, but that's not telling the story of his game.
Right. The only category Tkachuk is not leading in directly is assists. He's 3rd, and that's because, again, a defenseman is going to probably help set up more. So Hughes is leading, and Dahlin's actually 2nd.
Okay. And that's only because Bouchard just got on the power play last year.
So Tkachuk has 180 goals. That's the top of the class, right? Andrei Svechnikov is number 2. He's got 145 career goals.
He's stupid good. Yeah.
He is also 3rd in points because again, he's behind Hughes, because for a defenseman, by the way, Quinn Hughes being right on the cusp of Tkachuk is crazy.
Quinn Hughes is silly.
Yes,
like, as far as offensive defensemen go, yeah.
The guy who ranks 3rd in goals from that draft class is Yegor Sharangovich at 90.
Okay.
The guy who ranks 4th in that draft class,
is that Joel Farabee?
Is Joel Farabee at 88.
Okay.
And it is not like it's not a close
Saturday,
margin.
He might be tied with Sharangovich by now.
It's not a close margin either. It's another 16 goals back to Dahlin now makes the list at 72.
Sure.
And Kotkaniemi is at 70, and then Marchenko is doing really well from a goal scoring perspective for the number of games played. Marchenko's only got 180 games played, while everybody else above him is at 320 or more, and has 62 goals. Like, 62 goals in, like, a goal in every 3rd game you play is pretty darn good. Like, you'll be pretty high on that list, and you'll be pretty high on that list in no time. And he's the 49th overall pick. Look, Sharangovich being there is actually pretty good too, because he was 141st. Like, that's kind of a find, honestly.
Fair Fair enough.
But you get my point. Does it feel like Joel Farabee ranks 4th in goals, 6th in games played, and 7th in points from his draft class? Not a chance. But he does.
Yep. And
And there are some draft
I-
classes that just aren't great when it comes down to it, right? Like there are
of
great
course.
players from them. Like no one's saying Brady Tkachuk's not a great player or Quinn Hughes is not a great player, elite to a degree. It just means they're very few and far between. Like there's a very small handful, and the rest are kind of what they are. Like those are not 88 goals and 196 points and 376 career games is not tearing it up.
Nothing.
Right.
It's not bad either.
It's right in the
Solid.
middle, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and I think if you're coming back to what fans are complaining about, I think that's what fans are complaining about. I think you're kind of making the point, to be honest, is that those are kind of just guide numbers. They're good, they're solid, they're not
They
bad.
are, but what I'm trying to say is, with the exception of what 4 players from that draft, who are you getting that was elite? You actually picked one of the better players in the draft, all things considered.
But I think where that fan sentiment comes from is, okay, exactly. Why are we picking 14th?
No,
we should be picking 4th.
No, because no. It's partially that you have to develop those players. I'm not saying that's not part of the equation. We've already had that conversation. I'm saying he's one of the best players you could have had from that draft anyway, and everybody's ready to move on from him, not because of what he is. Like I get it; those are just kind of middle of the pack numbers. I understand that. It's where your frustration lies is not he's giving you middle of the pack. Your frustration lies in when was his debut, the 1920 season. So he's been around for 5 years giving you the middle of the pack numbers. Now I want something different.
Where's the growth?
Well, no, it's not even just where's the growth. It's I want something different. I don't even care. Go ahead and move him for another middle of the pack guy. I just want to have another middle of the pack guy to get frustrated at. Am I wrong?
So I think
if it wasn't more like, okay, so let's say it wasn't Morgan Frost and like what's one of the trades that we heard rumors about before? Oh, they were talking to Buffalo. Maybe they get Peyton Krebs. If you flip-flopped Morgan Frost with Peyton Krebs and got the same middle of the pack type of player, but it's somebody different who you can direct it to, you're going to at least like what happened when they got Jamie Drysdale last year? For the first portion of the year, it was, well, let's see what he can do. Oh, it's a different guy. Let's see what happens. Oh, he's just getting used to stuff. It's okay. And then halfway through this season, what happened? Oh, he may never be anything great.
Well, I think that's just Philadelphia, frankly. I think
it is, but that's the
market.
hard part about a rebuild is there's no right answers. It's not that simple.
I agree. I think,
and I question that from the beginning. Do they have the patience to deal with it?
No, absolutely not. And we talked about it, but I think it's a little bit of, well, do I want a speedboat or the mystery box? The mystery box could be anything. It could even be a speedboat. But the problem is it's not a speedboat. It's like a 99 Buick. It's fine. It'll get you where you need to go. It'll run.
I also keep coming back to the reason why people react this way is because you changed the game with 2 decisions this offseason that didn't really change your team. They were always part of the equation. It just changed the timeline. You got Michkov over here, and then you signed Konechny to the extension. Yes. Those are the 2 decisions that now have made it full speed ahead the next 2 off seasons. You better have it all figured out this off season and next. And if you do not, get ready to be left behind.
And we set it up for 12 months before Matvei Michkov showed up.
Right.
That we were going to have a 2 or 3 year waiting period where when he comes over, the ELC timer starts, and then we got to hit the ground running, and we got to make the most of it while he's making $1 million,
and nobody,
et cetera. Let me finish real quick.
No, I got you.
So he comes over. We spent 12 months setting up that we have this 2 or 3 year runway where Danny Briere is going to have all this time to get bad contracts off the book and clear cap space and figure out who's going to be on the roster and figure blah, 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 blah. So all you have to do is plug Matvei Michkov in at $1 million and boom, we're off and running. Right. And then instead, he showed up 12 months later, which no one is sad about because you have this generational franchise-esque looking player coming over early, and when you can get him out of Russia safely, you get him out of Russia safely, period.
Well, that was exactly, that's the equation with Michkov screw the timeline when you don't know
When
if
he's
it's
ready,
ever
Kevin.
gonna. Well,
Yes.
right. Well, if you don't know if it's ever gonna happen, you better do it when the opportunity presents itself.
But
Absolutely.
now that he's here, that's where in my head, I'm looking at this and going, okay, Danny Briere did not know that was going to happen. He may have had some inklings, he may have thought and hoped, and sure, whatever. I'm not going to, again,
Right, but
you
something
talked
comes
about
together pretty quickly.
you
Right. Yes.
exactly. So Danny Briere, and importantly, he kind of made a lot of his offseason plans already. They kind of knew what they were going to do. They knew what money they had to spend. They knew what money they didn't have to spend. They had already
Right.
made their trade deadline decisions with that in mind. There's all sorts of things that they already knew that were already locked in. Matvey Mishkov's here. Boom. 1 year of the ELC is gone. Okay. No problem. Now that you've known he's going to be here for 12 whole months now, by the time this offseason rolls around,
Mm-hmm.
now, Danny, it's time to make decisions with this information. And
Right.
this is the off season. This is the trade deadline and off season that I think is going to determine whether the Danny Briere era is going to be a success. And not in the short term, not immediately. I'm not saying, we'll have an answer on October 1st, but the
Right.
moves made over the next 6 to 8 months, I think are going to shape whether this rebuild is going to be a successful one or not under Danny Briere.
But I think where people get tired are, certain guys are not part of this long-term future, and like you're almost to a degree wasting your time a little bit by trying to figure out the best way to get the most value for certain guys if you don't if they're not part of this thing. I came back to that with the Scott Lawton discussion where it's like, look, I understand why Scott Lawton means a lot to the organization, means a lot to the locker room. I understand all of that. He is what he is as a player, and maybe being what you are as a player is not going to net you when it comes down to it, the first round pick you're looking for, and you just have to bite the bullet on it, because at the end of the day, what are you doing trying to keep going with this thing? Like, somebody else can step up in your room. Somebody else can take his spot on the roster if he is what he is. Don't hold on to guys just for the sake of holding on to them because you're trying to, like, you can build a culture in a lot of ways. You don't just have one Scott Lawton and nobody else.
Well, and
we said this with Nick Seeler last week. You've got a Nick Seeler. He's not wearing a letter. Does that mean he's not building culture in that room? I'm sure he is.
Right.
And Nick Seeler's contract situation is a little different. And you've backed yourself into this corner a little bit with, well, we're going to keep this guy, and we're going to keep this guy, and we're going to keep this guy. And okay, then what are you keeping somebody else for if there's an offer out there?
So my opinion on this has shifted a little bit. If you were listening to this show last year, by the way, subscribe to our YouTube channel while we're here. If you were listening to this show last year, you heard me advocating to keep Scott Lawton, because I think Scott Lawton last year was very important for that locker room, recovering from the Kevin Hayes era, recovering from the Keith Yandel era, recovering from the Ivan Provorov era. Whatever was going on in that locker room the 2 or 3 years prior under Alain Vigneault was rotten. And I think Scott Lawton did a lot last year to kind of help staple that room back together.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons you had all those kids stay over the summer. I talk about that summer group all the time. Your Drysdale and your York and your Bobby Brink and that whole Tyson Forrester, that whole little group. I now think 2025, you don't need Scott Lawton in your room anymore, because the culture has shifted away from the negative, toxic, whatever it was before, to this younger group, to these younger kids who all get along, who are all very clearly good friends. And I love Scott Lawton. I am not attempting to run him out of town, but I believe that his leadership is now a little bit on the more expendable side, whereas last year I don't believe it was.
Here's part of the problem. You want to keep Scott Lawton for the room and the culture and all of that stuff, fine. Go right ahead. Then you trade Nick Seeler last offseason, and you don't give Garnet Hathaway a 2-year extension, and you're moving him this year.
Well, no, I agree. And I think
you know what I mean? You've got
why Lawton becomes expendable.
Well, right, but now you don't even know if that market's going to even, like, yes, there's a market for him, but are you going to drive the price up because of how much you value him? Because, for God's sakes, Danny Briere played with him.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well,
I'm being serious.
I know. Well, now you've run another year off his contract, right?
Right,
Like
but
last year, he had some cost certainty and some stability on him.
right, but
Now
what
it's
I'm
a little
saying
less
is
so.
that if you don't attach yourself to other guys, Garnet Hathaway didn't need to have a 2-year extension. You could have moved him this year at his contract and gotten great value for him, because somebody who's in the playoff race is going to say, "Yeah, bring him to me." Absolutely. You could have done the same thing with
Didn't
Nick Seeler last year.
didn't Boston trade a first, a second, and a third for Hathaway a couple years ago? Like at the trade deadline? Like I'm
He
pretty
was
sure
in
Hathaway was moved for monstrous assets.
Well, I can look up his transaction history and
Okay.
easily get that for you. Absolutely.
Okay.
Because he was
Because I mean, he's exactly the kind of player you want if you're in a playoff spot. Now, maybe listen, here's tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, right? You sign him to a 2-year deal because that cranks up his trade value
Gar-
at the deadline, right?
Garnet
You crank him.
Hathaway. Garnet Hathaway went to Boston from Washington
Oh, to Boston. Okay, yeah.
went for Craig Smith, a 2023 first, a 2025 second, and a 2024 third.
Like if you can get just a first for Garnet Hathaway, you're probably pretty happy.
Sure, but that's the point. Like that could be your like think about this. Do you know how many UFAs the Flyers have this year?
There's a couple of them, aren't there?
No, the answer is 0.
Oh, is it not? Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yes. You know who your UFA is? Eric Johnson, who isn't playing.
And
Like,
if he comes back, we'll be making less than $1 million.
But he's making $1 million right now.
Okay.
It's a
you
flat
know what
mill.
I mean. He's not getting a raise at this
But
point.
I'm saying you have him, and then you have 4 RFAs, 3 at forward, Cates, Frost, Forrester, and then York on defense. That's your list of free agents. Short of like right at the moment, like right now, as I look at this list, Ula Lixell's on there. But like Lixell is back and forth between the minors all the time, and you know it. So it's like he's on this list today. Tomorrow he'll be part of the minor league group. To a degree, you know it. You know what I mean. But I'm saying last year you had Nick Seeler as part of that that UFA group that you chose to sign. You had Ryan Poehling at the time, who was a UFA that you could have moved in a really good year. You had Garnet Hathaway with 1 year left on his contract that this year could have been that UFA that you say, I'm trying to move him. Then you can breach the topic of, do I move Scott Lawton with 2 years left on his deal last year, 1 year left on his deal this year? Do I save him for next year? You could have toyed with that for another year because you don't want to trade every really good locker room guy at once. I understand that. Like, I could see how with a progression of, if I'm moving Nick Seeler last year and Garnet Hathaway this year and Scott Lawton next year, then I'm slowly breaking up a group of locker room guys that are part of the culture building process, and I don't want to do it all at once. I understand that, but you gave contract extensions to Seeler and Hathaway, and Lawton still got another year left on his deal. I don't know how you can go into year 4 of John Tortorella with, we're still building out this locker room culture with guys that you know are not part of the long-term future. I don't know how it makes any sense.
Well, and I agree. And I think, like you said, or like I said, I think the next 6 to 8 months is going to be dramatically impactful for Danny Briere's tenure. I think it's, like I said, last summer, he can be kind of forgiven because he didn't know that this information was happening. He didn't know that Michkov was coming. Now he has for 12 months, so there's no excuse. It's time to hit the ground and get going. And I'm not saying that they need to go out there and, trade Morgan Frost and 2 first-round picks for Dylan Cousins.
No, but okay, but do yourself another one for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, because I also just I left out one very key UFA, or would have been UFA.
Okay.
You got Michkov to come over here, right?
Yeah.
Then once that was official, what was the next order of business? What was the entire offseason based off of from that point on? What's Travis Konechny's next contract? That was priority number 1. As soon as Michkov was locked up, signed, the contract was done, what happened the very next day? Contract extension.
Yep.
Now Travis Konechny's part of this thing for the next 9 years. Really, it was the contract year and 8 more.
And
I don't think that I'm not saying that makes it a bad deal. By the way, think about this. You don't have a whole hell of a lot of talent on the roster. He's going to be at the way things are going. Again, don't we love our round numbers on this show? He got to the halfway point at 20 goals, 45 points. He is on pace for a 40-goal, 90-point season. And what did he do after? Okay, the Dallas game was bad for everybody, right? What did he do after that? 4 assists against Anaheim. So he's and guess what? He got an assist on the 1 goal in the Dallas game too. So he's got 5 points over his last 2 games to start the second half of the season. He's already at 50. Do you think that 90 points is not on the table this year for him? It absolutely is.
Yep.
Good luck replacing that. That's different, right?
Well,
that's different for a guy who's in his mid-20s that you have to decide on where he falls in the rebuild. It's a totally different equation, though, to sit there and talk about. We're going to sign the 31-year-old to another contract. We're going to sign, we're still not sure about whether or not to get rid, move Scott Lawton and trade him at 30 because he's good to the locker room. We're going to keep, let's sign a contract extension with 32, 33-year-old Garnet Hathaway because we like him for the room.
There has been,
and I love those. I love those guys too. You love a Nick Sealer, you love a Garnet Hathaway for what they bring to a contending team. Absolutely, but it's not a contending team. That's the problem.
There has been scuttlebutt about a bit of a soft trade deadline before Four Nations. That GMs want to get some business done before the international tournament. God forbid there's an injury, et cetera, et cetera. So there's talk about a little bit of a soft trade deadline before Four Nations, especially for players that are going. And I wonder if you see Rasmus Ristolainen out before then.
He's one of the names that's going to come up for sure.
And I think he is emblematic of what you're saying as a guy who is not going to be on the long-term roster, but is currently holding a roster spot.
Rasmus Ristolainen is emblematic of what we're saying for so many reasons. It's not even funny.
Exactly.
Do you because it's not just the do you move him situation. He's hard to move because of the contract that you gave him, which wasn't your. Well, hang on. He to me he is. It's not the money. It's the term, and the term is hard to move in season.
This year, two.
Right. Okay. But that's what I'm saying. You want to move him and get someone to take $5.1 million for 2 more years. I don't think that should be an impossible thing at all. Not even close.
He's looked really solid.
Right. Honestly. Not even close.
But he's not a guy that's going to be on your roster in 2030. He's just not.
Right. The reason I'm saying he's emblematic of the whole thing is not just the current contract and signing him or whatever, but all right. You want to go backwards, or want to go in reverse for a minute here? Your first round pick this past draft was Jet Lachenko. All right, seems like he's got a future here, obviously. They gave him a handful of games.
Already has some games.
Right. Totally makes sense. The draft before that, 2023. You got Matvei Michkov, who's obviously a key piece of the whole thing. You got Oliver Bonk. All right, jury's still out on Bonk because it's still too early. I get that. Then you got, who was their first round pick in 2022? Oh, right. The guy we've already touched on in this show already because he was playing for another team.
In a second. Right.
Sure, if you want to go with that. But if you want to try to color it that way. But you know who you picked that you thought was.
And a second that's almost a first, let's be honest.
Oh, sure. All right. But you know who you picked that draft. Mm-hmm. Who'd you pick in 2021?
I don't remember.
It's a trick question. Nobody, because you traded that first round pick for Rasmus Ristolainen.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks, Chuck.
Exactly. No, this is where I'm not trying to defend the front office for some of the contracts that they've signed since going public with the rebuild. But before that, before you were actually public with the rebuild, that was the type of things you were doing. We're not rebuilding, so we're going to trade for a defenseman with our first round pick.
Newsflash. Daniel Briere is not Chuck Fletcher. Daniel Briere is not Paul Holmgren. As everything we have ever seen for the last 18 months, 2 years or so here, is that era of the Flyers is over, right? We've talked about the fact that Bobby Clark and Bill Barber and Paul Holmgren are no longer involved in the day-to-day decision making.
Right.
We have talked about the fact that they used the word rebuild. They acknowledged that it was going to be a process.
Right.
This is a new era of the Philadelphia Flyers, and fans and ourselves here too, me, patient. We just have to be patient. And it's a process.
Well, right,
And
but
not in a Sixers trust the process. It's gonna take 10
no, it's
years
not.
way.
But what's hard about that equation is you, especially this season, more than most, because more than anything, what happens this season or what comes up later this year? You're at 50 years since your last Stanley Cup. The last decade in general has been abysmal, right? You're at a point where it's hard to be patient because you've kind of just screwed around with this thing for the better part of the last decade. You've avoided the inevitable. And now you're only now are you really trying to kick it into gear by talking the talk, but there's not enough walking the walk for people because it's not completely tearing it down, or at least it's not shedding a lot of the of what you would still consider dead weight.
And because historically speaking, the Flyers have never ever been the break it down and rebuild franchise.
Sure.
Flyers have historically throughout their franchise history been the throw money at the problem until it solves it problem. Or
and they haven't had to be either. That's also part of it. Like
right.
For years and years and years, you're an immediate, pretty just about anyway, maybe hold for the first few years you exist, but you're pretty much an immediate success story from being an immediate immediate success story. You build that into constant playoff appearances, more cup final appearances. You're there all the time. Then it starts to fade out a little bit. You have a very short period, like 5 years of lean years. You end up at 5 years of lean years. Then what happens after that, or in the middle of that? You get your other guy. You get your next one, right? Okay. And the next one is an immediate success. And then you start to build around the next one. You create a line that's the best line in hockey. You eventually get back to where you want to be. You get back to conference finals. You get back to a cup final. You keep yourself in that realm for the better part of what? That was a 10-year period. They made the conference finals 4 times.
Pretty close. Yeah, it was insane.
Yeah. It just doesn't, something doesn't go right for whatever reason, which is part of the playoff equation. It has to all fall into place in the playoffs. You're putting yourself in the right position. You're Final Four material, but you're not quite there. And then
it's convenient where your narrative stopped, or that first part, the dominant part of the narrative stopped.
Sure.
Because then they instituted a salary cap.
Right. The lockout happens. The salary cap comes into play, and that's what you've been adjusting to ever since.
Since then, for the last 20 plus years, this franchise has been struggling for a direction, and they spent
but not
trying
completely
to throw money at it.
Well, eventually, because for the first part of that equation, you didn't have to throw money at it because you basically hold on.
You're telling me the Ilya Brizgalov contract wasn't.
I'm not that far ahead. Nope, I'm not that far ahead.
Okay,
I'm talking about you come back from the lockout in 2006 and your minor league team just won the Calder Cup the year before. So guess what?
And you've got all those players.
Right. You've got rookies who are good that don't make the salary cap that much of a problem. You got Mike Richards and Jeff Carter part of this. Patrick Sharp is part of this. You've even got your next goalie from that team.
Was Patrick Maroon on that team?
That's a good question. I don't think so, though.
He would have been. I think he would have been right after. Right after.
Right. But either way. But I'm saying you graduate your Richards, Carters, Umbergers. Your goalie is Antero Niittymaki for a little while. It's like everybody from that minor league team makes the jump pretty much, right? What do you need? Like what do you need to worry about the salary cap for? You've got a bunch of younger guys who are ready to join the group of veterans.
Yep.
Pretty much. And then at least for that very first year, then your second year is not very good. You basically, in the course of 6 months, almost do a rebuild, tear the whole thing down, build it right back up with, we're changing this, that, and we are going to throw some money at the thing.
And by the way, here's stronger.
Well, no, we're not even at
Oh,
Pronger yet.
not even there
you
yet.
know,
Okay.
let's make one trade and one free agent signing. Hello, Chemo Tiemann, and hello, Scott Hartnell. Hello, Danny Briere. And the next thing you know, your team is back in the conference finals again. You know, a couple of trades, a couple of free agent signings, just, you know, that really quick process. But next thing you know, you're back there. Then you're in the playoffs for the first round against a team that's real equally built it. Had to go through the rebuild process and built it and has superstars, right? You hit Pittsburgh. Oh, well, that was the team that won those years, right?
Right. That was the
Two
team that
Stanley
had
Cup
Sidney
final
Crosby and
appearances.
Evgeny Malkin in their just hitting their absolute primes. Right.
Right. Just barely hitting it.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
So then you do get to the part where you go out. All right, let's go get Chris Pronger. That works really well for a year, right? Let's go get Chris Pronger. And then it was really where it hits is in the midst of, you find out that, you know, the younger guys start to dry up a little bit. You've made a bunch of deals, and so now you don't have any draft capital, because aside from when you picked Claude Giroux, you have no draft capital, because you're now left with, well, we're going to move this guy, we're going to move that guy. This is all still in the era of Richards Carter. You're still on that.
Yep.
And then you get into a playoff round where you realize, okay, goaltending is still the big problem here. Got all these other guys. Goaltending's the big problem. So you make the decision to go and get a goalie. That's what you're going to throw the money at. Goaltending is the biggest problem. We're throwing the money at the goaltending. And you pick up the elite guy. And he's not bad during the course. Like, there's drama during that first year, but he's not bad per se. And then you get to the playoffs.
And by the way, you missed at some point. You were bad enough to get second overall pick and draft James Van Riemsdyk.
Well, I forgot. Not forgot. It was, I didn't throw that part in because Van Riemsdyk was not nearly as key of a part to that thing. Like, when you look at what put them back on both the 08 run, and the 2010 run. It is,
you're in the middle there where you were bad enough to dip down that far.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying the moves that were most impactful from that offseason, where you turned around, were not you drafted second overall. It was,
I agree.
It was, Danny Briere is a free agent. We're signing Danny Briere. We're going to make we're going to make an impactful trade with the Nashville Predators that brings back two guys that end up being top players on your team. You know, totally transform what you think about your roster going forward completely. You know, what would those years have been like? Those playoff runs been like if you don't have Chemo Tiemann and Scott Hartnell?
They wouldn't have.
Exactly. They don't exist.
Yeah. Correct.
You make those moves and you turn your team into something totally different. You know, it is exactly what it is. Even for a handful of years.
And then what happened for the next decade?
Well, right. What happened for the next decade was it slowly faded out. Chris Pronger suffers a career-ending injury. Chemo Tiemann starts to go toward the back nine of the career. You know, it kind of runs out with Scott Hartnell to a degree. Like, it's time for that to change.
You flip Richards and Carter, essentially. I'm paraphrasing. You flip Richards and Carter into Voracek, Shen, Simmons, Couturier.
Right. That was the draft pick you got from Columbus. Yep.
Yeah. So what
it all applies.
The Flyers have historically been a franchise that was very aggressive, and they're willing to trade pieces for whatever they think is going to help them win now.
1,000%. 1,000 freaking percent. Absolutely.
And this is the first meaningful time in the franchise's history that they have taken a step back and gone, hey, maybe not this year, maybe not even next year, but we're building something sustainable.
But you know what? When it starts to turn into that equation, and they were still on the cusp of playoff appearances and all that type of stuff, but even like after the Richards Carter trades, that's what you have to kind of move to sit there and be like, and even then that was on the younger side.
Right.
You need to have, even like in that moment, you kind of even need to have the ability to move the Chemo Tiemann in at that spot, or the Scott Hartnell at that spot, and be like, absolutely, that's something that someone else is going to find valuable that I can turn into a good pick.
Yep.
Right. Like that, like
You got what, a third round pick for Kimmo Timonen?
Well, not by the time. Well,
by the time you got rid of him.
Well, and full equation of the situation that he goes
Right.
through what he had to miss the entire year. You waited out until he's able to play. And then, and really what that wasn't even, you weren't even making that deal for rebuild or anything of the sort. You were making that deal
for Kimmo Timonen.
Right. You made that deal to give him one shot at it. And the one shot worked. And as soon as he won, he was done.
It's really a shame that one of our best moments as a franchise over the last 10 years is that guy winning.
Is watching somebody else win.
Yeah. Because listen, you can say what you want.
I mean, you've been doing that going back to. You've been doing that going back to LA, though.
Yeah.
Did you not feel good to a degree for those guys to an extent?
Less so.
No, you know what? All right.
So.
The guys you feel good about are the ones that you know have waited it out and played through years where they came close and didn't. You felt great.
That's why I wanted Claude Giroux to go to Colorado.
But right, like, and if he ever won a cup, you'd feel good for him too. I understand it. You felt good. You felt good for Simone Gagne when it finally happened because Simone Gagne put in the time here, and it just wasn't in the cards.
Absolutely.
You feel it a little less for the guys who weren't here as long, so you feel it a little like it's more about guys who becomes more guys who got away than guys you feel good for.
When Mark Recchi won his second or third cup to get, all right, Mark, congratulations.
No, that wasn't even who I was thinking of. It's you don't feel that. No, you don't feel that way about Justin Williams or Patrick Sharp because that feels more of like guys who got away.
They were just young guys who ended up playing their career somewhere else.
Sure, so that's why you feel that way about Carter Richards. Right. You didn't do it for that, right?
See,
you feel better for the guys.
But
I'm saying you feel better for the guys who put in a lot of time that if they won somewhere else, you felt good about it.
Yeah.
And you felt great for Kimmo Timonen because you knew what the story was with Kimmo Timonen and how close he was close to retiring for not reasons that he were under his control.
If Hartnell had gotten one when they traded him away, would have felt great for him. Would have been awesome for him. Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned Claude Giroux here, and one of the reasons we're talking about notable moments that this franchise has had, and I'm kind of going to bring it back to this Ducks game because the environment in the Wells Fargo Center on Saturday was, in my opinion, that was the best Flyers game at the Wells Fargo Center to have a ticket for since the Claude Giroux 1000th game send-off.
I mean, it's pretty close.
And obviously it's a little bit different because that was, like we were just kind of talking about, that was a special send-off for a franchise legend who has given us everything.
I want to allude to what I was talking about a little bit last week because and this is maybe more our own conversation than what we said on the show, but at one point in time there was a threat of snow coming in for Saturday. So the weather may not be the nicest there. So there was a threat of snow. There was just, all that type of stuff. And I just kept in the back of my mind from covering the team. There are certain games that and I'm not trying to use the circled on the calendar line per se, but there's games I got to be in the building to do my job for this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because part of the equation is sending everything, you can hear stuff on TV to an extent, but you really need people to be inside the building to give you a perspective of what it sounded like. And
for the record, on television, clear as day. F you, Cutter. Jamie's better, and also the Cutter, which was my favorite personally.
So I'm actually going back to I'm looking at my tweets and stuff like that because probably as many videos as I've ever posted during a game. Seriously,
you and everybody else from the press box. The Twitter timeline was
so. By the way, the first
farming was real on Saturday.
It is just shy of 6:30. By the way, now there was, there were people with signs all over the place, and security was obviously security was amped up for this game, and as was to be expected. Why
more uniformed police officers than usual. Just
sure. I mean, I wasn't looking around for it. Whatever. And anyway,
well, there was a couple, and there's usually not that many. Usually, in arena staff handles it all. So.
All right, but pretty much right as this is about 5 minutes before warm up, and that's about when it starts. Right, the booing is starting. The we want Cutter chants have started. So you all and I when I tweeted out about that the we want Cutter chant has that had it already started. I even said building's going to be lively tonight, and we knew it, right? You just needed confirmation for it. We all kind of wondered, would they take the chance and throw him in the starting lineup so his name gets announced pregame? Not a chance.
Not a shot.
Little surprised that Jamie Drysdale wasn't.
I agree.
Because we had talked about that too. But John Tortorella, I don't think usually plays that card too often.
John Tortorella talks about not paying attention, and that's all media facing. We know he probably pays a little bit more attention than he makes it seem. I would have liked to see him throw Jamie Drysdale in the starting lineup.
Right, but he doesn't
knows what this means.
He doesn't do it a lot, and we're also talking about the same guy that has scratched guys in their hometowns against their former teams to a degree. Sometimes whatever it may be, he doesn't factor that stuff in. Not when writing down who the first group out is. Not like it's word.
Yeah.
You know what though too, because he knows he certainly knows the significance of the game for Jamie Drysdale from a standpoint of like, it's kind of cool then that instead of trying to manufacture the moment by putting him in the lineup, you let the moment come to him for something good that happens, and it happens more organically than that. So anyway,
man, the pop for that goal was louder than any other, right?
So
I know they scored 6 goals, but come on.
Well, so anyway, so the game gets started. By the way, couldn't be more fitting, not fitting, but perfect that there was an icing like 9 seconds into the game. So you have a chance for everything that's to pause for a minute from a gameplay perspective. And the crowd is already, and I even said he hasn't even stepped on the ice yet. And we already have We Want Cutter. Okay. Or not. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. We Want Cutter was before warmups. This is now just your straight Cutter.
It was FU Cutter.
No, this is no.
No, you're right.
This was just a straight like the goalies in Nashville.
The Cutter, yeah.
We're just hitting you with that slow Cutter chant, right? So he finally takes the ice. Mm-hmm. You always knew when he took the ice because he got booed every time he stepped on the ice.
Man, listen, I have to say, I've been watching Flyers games for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen this fan base boo everybody. Mm-hmm. I have seen this fan base boo everybody.
Yes.
I love when this fan base is paying enough attention that when the puck goes to somebody, they start booing.
Right.
Okay. This fan base was paying so much attention that he didn't even have to get the puck. He got off the bench. And
I was going to say he got booed when he got onto the ice. He got booed when he stepped off the ice. He got booed when he touched the puck.
That was, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, that was the most insane thing I've ever seen.
Right.
Because like I said, it's not just when he touches the puck, when he's impacting the game. 20,000 pairs of eyes were locked in on this kid on the bench to the point where, like, when Ducks started standing up for a line change, you give it a scan and go, is he coming out? Is he coming out? Do we get to boom? Is he coming out? Yeah, he is. Boo, get him, boo.
Yes. And so anyway, so it's crazy. So it starts with the boos as soon as he comes on the ice. That does roll over into what you were talking about, the FU chant that was out there. For sure.
Instantly. It was great.
Right. Now, by the way, this is all I've done from my seat the entire game to this point. The opening faceoff happens. The opening faceoff is a perfect opportunity for people. They're going to start on something right away, whether, in a more intense game, like a Pittsburgh game, for example, that's close to playoff time, let's just say, if both teams are competitive, because I've done those where both teams are on the verge of making, like I've been around for one of the playoff series against them in 2018, right?
Absolutely.
Usually you get one of two pretty much right off the opening faceoff. It's either going to be a really loud "Let's go Flyers" chant, or it's going to be the Crosby sucks chant. But puck's down, we're starting. That's when it starts, right? So everybody was ready for it the second the puck was down. So that happens. Then he steps on the ice. We were all sitting there ready for that moment too. And then you have to kind of, like, for me, we have to snap into, there is also a game going on. And you look up at just shy of the first TV timeout. Shots are 8-1 with 14 minutes left in the first period. So it's not even 6 minutes into the game, and they are already up 8-1 in shots. The Flyers.
And that's why you can say whatever you want. And again, not just you, but you can say whatever you want about the Cutter Gauthier thing being a media-driven narrative and the blah blah blah.
There's
jump with the
energy.
players.
I know there's
jump.
energy. Now, I wasn't completely sure what you were going to get with this. Like, yes, they should be amped up for the game and what the building was going to be like. I didn't know until Saturday morning, prepping my game preview, because I'm not going to pay super close attention to every detail of Anaheim's games and stuff like that, or whatever. I didn't know until Saturday morning that a team that already struggles to score goals, and in fact, when you played them, 2 weeks earlier is what it was, 3 weeks earlier in Anaheim, scored 1 goal. Flyers won that game 3-1. And the guy who scored the goal was not available for personal reasons. Is dealing with a personal situation. So Troy Terry is out as their leading scorer, pretty much one of the only guys on the roster that can score with consistency to any degree.
And obviously we hope everything's okay for him.
Sure. Oh, it's not about that. It's not about that he missed a game. Like,
I just wanted to mention it. Yep. I agree.
I mean, listen, the narrative's going to be driven through the roof and spun every sort of way if it's Cutter Gauthier out for personal reasons for this game. Man, he was not. This is a guy who's missed
the building might have been louder.
This is a guy who's missed an entire road trip.
Yeah. Okay, right. No, I know. And that's
totally different scenario. And oh, by the way, so they don't have Troy Terry. Trevor Zegras is still hurt. Yep. You know, they don't have a good team.
They're a team that doesn't have much firepower, and they're missing some of their bigger guns. Right.
Like, I watched this game the first time around, and for it to be the first game out of that break at the holidays, it kind of makes it dreadful, because it's like, it's already 2 teams that aren't very good to begin with, let alone now they're out of a break. So you got an ugly,
you got some sloppy hockey.
You got an ugly 1-1 game through 2 periods that the Flyers finally pulled out in the end. Yep. Only due to the fact that they killed off a penalty and scored an empty netter at the end, right? Congratulations on that. This is a little bit more energetic of a start, right? And then Morgan Frost scores and opens it up. All right, there's the first one. You're still playing a pretty tight game until you get to the later stages of the period. You get a power play, and here comes the next moment that's worth talking about, because Jamie Drysdale scores a goal. Doesn't have many this year, right? 2. That was his second of the season. The reaction, he gives it a little something with the celebration. Not as energetic as I thought he could have potentially gone. He's not really that guy. He's not really that kind of guy.
He's a pretty soft-spoken guy, it seems.
Yeah. But he gave you a little something. And then the building realized, and the building was already doing it, which I laughed at a little bit, because the Jamie's better chant, I understand where it comes from. Don't get me wrong.
It is blind defending of our guy. Let's be honest.
Because that's like, there's a part of me that laughs and goes, that's not what you were saying on social media 2 days ago. 2 days ago, it was, Jamie Drysdale maybe had one of the worst games he's played as a Flyer.
Yeah, but like how, listen, I know that you have siblings as well as I. You are an older, or you
just one. Yeah, just one, and young. She's younger. Yeah.
Right. You are an older brother, so you know what it's like to pick on a younger sibling, and you're allowed to do it. But if nobody else does it, we got problems.
Right, but this was a direct. This was not even just to say to defend. This was a direct.
Yes, it was.
The guy we got for you is better, even if we don't fully believe it.
Well, listen, here's how Philadelphia.
It doesn't hurt that coming into the game, Cutter Gauthier's numbers: 5 goals, 13 assists.
Pretty tough. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, Jamie Drysdale's not having a great season by any stretch. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt that Cutter Gauthier's not either.
Exactly. Regardless, this game was a lot of fun. Is there anything else you want to touch on from this game? Because there was a Matvei Mishkov goal and an excellent celebration out of that. Love a little.
Oh, that was.
Love a stick twirl and put.
So I'll get to that in 1 second, because I'm going through. I posted video right after Drysdale's goal. They're already chanting for him. Lou Nolan comes on to announce the goal. The place sound. By the way, it was 1 year and 1 day after his first game as a Flyer, which everybody should remember is like everybody went nuts for him. Then he assisted on a goal that night. Place went nuts for him. And by the way, it wasn't like it was just a goal from like, oh, he just took a shot from the blue line.
No,
a pretty goal. Like,
Pretty goal.
Yeah, like you love that.
If
They
if
scored. They
that's
scored.
if yeah,
They
that's a
scored
good
one
sign
more
for
in the
Jamie
second.
Drysdale.
Sure, they scored one more in the second period. Owen Tippett on a 2-on-1 that was about as predictable a goal being scored as I can find. Like you
Yep.
saw that open up. The shot goes wide. They're going to get an odd man rush. Somebody, Konechny's the one who gets kind of the play from the defenseman, so he's going to have a passing lane. He gets it there. I don't even know if it was in the back of the net. I think it was barely off his stick, and I was already saying like, bang, that's in, because like you
Well,
could
I
see
will
that
say
play out in slow motion practically. Then
I'm glad to see Owen Tippett take the shot, because I feel like this team has been looking for like
they
that
pass it
one
up a
extra
lot. They do.
pass in that situation, especially him
Um,
recently.
yeah,
Like he's
and then
definitely been focusing on passing recently,
right.
but I like to see him shoot there.
Then third period, the floodgates just open up. Paling with
That's
a
the
nice
end
one
of
to
it.
start
Yeah.
it. Important for Michkov for sure.
Huge.
That
And
celebration
a
we
nice little skilled play too, playing it off the backboard. And
sure
it's a nice
power
shot.
play goal. So the power play, by the way, goes 2 for 4. Like even that struggle area had a night.
Love it.
But like I think, look, I don't know if Michkov did that because of the circumstances of the building, playing to the crowd. We discussed this pre-show. He hadn't scored at home since November 25th.
Yeah, I think he felt a little stress relief, and that's where most of that came from. But
He,
I think the energy in the building probably lent itself to a bit of a bigger
sure.
celebration.
Well, and he'd also only had, I think he only had 1 goal prior to, because he had 2 points against 2 points against Utah. I don't think one of them was a goal after he had scored the overtime winner against St. Louis. Don't think he had a goal again. He didn't have a goal against Columbus. So he scores against LA. There's one of them. Okay, fine. But like it had been a while. Like he only had 1 goal for a really long stretch. So I think that was hopefully that's a little bit of a monkey off the back kind of thing. Like that everything kind of starts to fall into place for him. It could,
Like you said, his first home goal since November 25th. So more than a month without a home goal. Definitely good to see him get off the schneid a little bit there.
I mean, if nothing else, because of the way the crowd was, his first play, whenever he has a playoff game, get your popcorn ready.
Man, you're going to see a lot of 39 jerseys in that building for a very long time.
Sure.
Yeah.
But,
okay. So
and then just for good measure, Garnet Hathaway scores 2.
And he wanted one real bad. You could tell.
Yeah. I mean, that was just, and then like total footnote on the story, but you feel good for Sam Emerson to get a shutout too.
I was just going to mention that. I know we talked about goaltending and how it's been a pretty big issue. We talked about it all last week. We talked about it for a lot of the early portion of this show. You get Sam Emerson back on Saturday. He comes back.
He played Thursday.
Oh, he played Thursday. You're right. I'm sorry.
And again, kind of footnote, because he wasn't bad in this game. Right. Like I know they lose and it's not very, like
that was the team in front of him looking not great, and Dallas being a very good team more than anything Sam Emerson did.
Right. He looked fine and then gave you everything you needed. And again, it wasn't he didn't have to be outstanding, didn't have to make a ton of tough saves, but he was good and got a shutout for it.
To say on Saturday, he looked good, did what he had to do.
For the time he's missed with injury, by the way, do you know what a shutout does for his numbers?
It's probably huge.
Well, I already mentioned his save percentage went back into I think it's back to 880 or something like that, and that feels great. Or it might be a little bit higher, honestly. I'm going to pull it up right now just to get it. His save percentage is back up to 888 with that 1 game.
Yeah, it's great for him. And
his goals against drops to 286. Like it's back to being that's respectable.
That is super respectable in today's NHL, for sure. And yeah.
So there you go with that. So all that stuff factoring in, not only the night delivered for everything you thought it was going to be. It's probably going to be the highlight of the home schedule at this point. Short of
playoff run.
No, I was going to say short of that's going to be the highlight of anything anticipated.
I agree.
You go into a game if something happens. I don't know. Do we get a game where Michkov scores a hat trick at some point? Maybe. And then that becomes a highlight moment, maybe. But let's put this way. It's not like this home schedule has been devoid of great moments on the season. Oh. Michkov has scored an overtime winner at home. Scott Lawton had a 4-goal game on home ice, and the place was going nuts when they recognized that that's what was happening in front of them. It's all like that does happen from times. But in terms of high anticipation, you're walking into the building ready to see where this takes you. That was one, and it delivered full force.
It was game of the year for sure. As far like I said, as far as Flyers games you want to have a ticket for, number one on the home schedule for sure. And it delivered in every single way.
Short of next season's schedule being Anaheim comes in October, let's just say, you might have hit your peak. It's January 11th. You might have hit your peak on the 2025 home schedule in January.
See, I am more optimistic about what the team will look like in the fall, but we'll see. And
I'm saying in terms of but I'm sure that's not anticipated. You're going in like they might be good.
See, but over the summer, if they make 2 or 3 big ads, that
fair.
First home opener is going to be really anticipated.
Home opener, maybe we'll see what happens, but.
All right, and I think that is a great place to put a pin in it for today. We ended the week on a high note with this Ducks game. We didn't really get a chance to go looking ahead, so I'll just run through it real quick. It's 4 games this week. It's another busy week. Florida, Columbus, the Islanders, New Jersey. Only Florida's at home. There you go.
It won't be again though.
January week.
It is only Florida at home, but it won't be my only game this week. So.
Ooh, and we will hear about that on our next show. I'll leave that as a tease. In the meantime,
I'll tell you the one thing I will leave you with, because it was a thought that popped in my head as I'm watching this game. Okay, that was the most anticipated game of the season by far, and then they just dominated in it, right? And I know it was Anaheim, and Anaheim's missing guys, and is not very good to begin with, right? Listen, I don't know what happens from here. But let's just say they go out and they beat Florida somehow because the energy carries over. And then you've got Columbus, Islanders, Jersey on the schedule. Islanders are going to come up again. The Rangers still haven't figured out all their problems yet. You know, Detroit's still on the schedule, still trying to figure out things with a new coach. I'm not saying that they're going to make a run. But if they start winning more games now, you're going to point back to the game that they all kind of had a common theme behind this whole thing, that the crowd was into it for the same reason, that the players were into it. You got guys barking at Cutter Gauthier left and right. Konechny wanted a piece of him at one point in time, and he can say he didn't challenge him. His lips say different.
I want a John Boy breakdown so bad. Anyway. All right. Well,
you have that one. Michkov was into it with him. Hathaway pulls him into a pile. It was great. And if that turns this season around to some degree, you'll be coming back to that every single time, but we'll have to see.
Absolutely. And that was the most anticipated game of the season. Hopefully this was your most anticipated podcast of the season, but the next one will be next week. We will be back next week. Talk a bunch of games to talk about. Schedule's a little bit funky, but we'll figure it out. Follow us on social media. We'll be posting it there. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where it is just at Kevin Durso. You can also find our podcast everywhere you find your podcast. YouTube, sportstalkphilly.com. Anywhere you find your podcast. Subscribe to us over there. Leave likes, leave reviews, whatever you need to do. Helps out here. So that'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week. And until then, let's go Flyers.